Sorry to be late. Too much yakking. Hope you're all doing good. Not very responsive today. Okay, well, now that Bob's awake, I guess we can carry on. I was a little concerned by the snoring that I was hearing over there. Okay, well, today we are going to be talking about two places, the Mount of Olives and Gethsemane, and they are actually connected. One is at the bottom of the other. And you know, when we talk about these places in terms of the Bible, what a tremendous span of time we have. So Abraham goes to Jerusalem, it was Salem then, in the year approximately 1850 BC. So almost 4,000 years ago, Abraham goes to this location, and he offers his son Isaac there. And then 3,000 years ago, around 1000 BC, you have David who establishes his kingdom there. He was 7 years in Hebron, then he moved his capital to Jerusalem when they took all of that. And then, of course, Jesus was 2,000 years ago. So we're really talking about a span from our day of 4,000 years. But Jerusalem has been kind of the center for all of then. And I have news for you. It's going to be yet again. It is an important place. Here's the top of obviously, of the Mount of Olives. That's called the Seven Arches Hotel. It's an Arab hotel. I've stayed there. We're going to take the Palm Sunday walk. So when you arrive by bus up here, everybody gets out and you take the picture. I'll show you one of those. And then those, right down this, you see those two, they're actually walls on either side of a walkway. And you walk down here like this. You turn into the Church of Dominus Flevit. You keep on going down this little walkway here. This is the Palm Sunday walk right down into here. This is the Church of All Nations, and this is their area of the Garden of Gethsemane. And all of this area would have been, you can see that all of this has olive trees in it all around here. It's all cemetery now, of course. And then there's a little garden over here that I'll show you. That I like to get into because it's a quiet place where you can actually pray. Everything else in this area is always quite busy with lots of people visiting. But anyway, I'll show you that. And then you can walk up this road and into Jerusalem as you go up that way. So anyway, this is up in this area. This is the Tower of the Ascension right there. All of this is Arab areas up in here. This would be considered East Jerusalem. And so, you know, there's a Christian school up there that's for the Arabs, and there's a hospital up there and different things. And if you keep on going down this little gully here in the Kidron, you'll come over to Silwan, which is an Arab village over here. And David's palace was over in this area well, it'd be more down here. But anyway, that's kind of the geography of the place. When you go there, it's mandatory that you start out on the top of Jerusalem, on top of the Mount of Olives with a picture, because you've got the city in the background there. And that's always a beautiful picture. This picture was the only time I've been there in the afternoon for a picture. And you can see the shadows of the people. You know, it's not good, and had to do a lot of monkeying around to get that picture to show up. But this is the way it's supposed to look. And by the way, I just noticed these pictures are how many years apart, but I'm wearing the same orange shirt in both pictures. Yes. Well, you know, that is, I definitely do that. You know, the thing of it is, I have a certain set of shirts that I wear when I go to Israel. I really don't wear many of the time. They're polo shirts, you know. And so I was teaching one night and showing pictures from Thessalonica, and the lady says, "Hey, I noticed that in that picture you're wearing the same shirt you're wearing now." And so, well, You know, I say if they're not worn out, don't throw them away. So, but anyway, but that is, so here's the top from the top, and you get the great view of the city and all of that. If you're looking at the Mount of Olives from the southwest, you're looking at kind of, this would have been the view that David would have had from his palace looking up there. He's a little bit to the left in this picture. And this one shows you some of the stuff that's notable. This is the church of Mary Magdalene, the Russian church. But, you know, different pictures show different pathways. But this is the pathway. This is the the Palm Sunday walk goes up this way. So from this angle. And we'll spend a little bit of time here. In fact, this might be a good time to kind of just take the first story that we're going to talk about. So I've selected several stories from different eras of time for the kind of the Bible study portion of it. But I'd like to begin with David. So we're talking 1000 BC, approximately 3,000 years ago, that David has his story. And when you think about these, the story, so in the story, David is going to flee Jerusalem, and he's going to head up over the top of the Mount of Olives. Well, this picture, I think, is from around 1890 or so. You can see that the Mount of Olives wasn't much. In fact, this one is taken from the same era. I took it out of the same book. You know, you've got... I think this is the Palm Sunday road here. This is actually the main road now is this road going up there, up to the top of the Mount of Olives. But what you notice about it, I mean, there are some olive trees and, you know, some cypress and that sort of thing, but it's relatively barren and certainly not populated. You know, there's hardly anybody, you don't see really, there's a house there, but you don't really, and this is a church here. No, that's the church there. That's the church where, from a call of Mary. But, I mean, it's pretty desolate looking. There's a little few structures, but not many, and not very populated. You know, 100 years ago, let's call it 150 years ago, let's go to 1880, there were 25,000 Jews in the whole land. 25,000. So that's almost none. And there weren't that many more Arabs. And so the land was very unpopulated. There was hardly anybody there. And nobody really cared about Israel and that part of the world. Mark Twain went to, he had, I forget the name of his book now, but he went to Israel, and he really didn't like the place. He said it's dingy, it's grimy, it's dirty, it's ugly. You know, he had a way with words, and none of them were good when it came to describing this area. You know, I forget, I can't remember the name of his book, but it was like in the mid-1800s. But it was Strangers Abroad or something about, what's it called? Well, Innocents Abroad, yes. See, look at what a smart lady she is right there. Even when she's not being rewarded, she knows these things. You know, they say when you get to be in your 90s, your memory is supposed to be fading and all of that, but not that lady right there. And we have somebody who's going to have a birthday this week, going to be 89. Wave, you got to be proud of it, you know. Yeah. So that's good, yeah. But anyway, so it was definitely kind of ugly for a long period of time. The Turks had, the Ottomans had it, they're trying to get it again. You can see they've taken over a big part of Syria now, Turkey has. But they had a policy that the taxes, property taxes, were levied based on the number of trees that you had on your property. So if you had a lot of trees, they assumed that you had a lot of wealth, and so they taxed your property based on trees. On my property, I have half of it in forest so that I get a discount on my property taxes. But they had exactly the opposite. And so what do you think smart people did with all their trees? They cut them down. I mean, you had the benefit of firewood and lumber, and you'd also lower your taxes. Well, if everybody in the whole Ottoman world is acting that way, pretty soon there's nothing there. I mean, you just denude the place of vegetation, and when the trees go away, the animals go away. I mean, the water retention is a problem. Even though one of these Douglas firs around here will drink 200 gallons of water a day. So I mean, they really suck up the water. I'm peeling some bark off of one right now. It's amazing how much water is in those things and how heavy they are. But anyway, and Israel, in coming back, really even before they owned the land, before they became a nation, they were buying land in various parts of Israel and immediately beginning to plant trees. They have planted hundreds of millions of trees in Israel. I mean, literally from space you can tell the difference because it's turning green and it's affecting the climate. Right now in Iran, they have a drought. They may have to go to water rationing in Iran here shortly because they've managed their water resources so poorly, whereas Israel is water rich at the moment through desalination, but through also proper irrigation and planting trees. It conserves the ground. Everything is better when there's trees. That's why we call this the evergreen state, because we have a lot of trees. But anyway, let's read out of 2 Samuel chapter 15. It is the story of David fleeing Jerusalem. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom." What's that guy? The commie from New York? They're with him. Mendami the commie, yeah. Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin upon us and put the city to the sword." The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." The king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at a place some distance away. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath, marched before the king. The king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your countrymen. May kindness and faithfulness be with you." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it mean life or death, there will your servant be." David said to Ittai, "Go ahead, march on." So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley. So in this picture, the Kidron Valley is down at the bottom. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the desert. So the desert is on the other side of the hill. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. See, they hadn't built the temple yet. That was Solomon's job later on. But David had assembled the stuff, and he had brought the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. We discussed that last week. So they're going to take the Ark with them. They set down the Ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Take the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, 'I am not pleased with you,' then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him." The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Aren't you a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your son Ahimaaz and Jonathan, son Abiathar. You and Abiathar take your 2 sons with you. I will wait at the fords in the desert," that is, the fords in the Jordan River, "until word comes from you to inform me." So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too and were weeping as they went up. So these are, this is another scene. This picture, got this right here. Look at everything around it. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing there. Let's see, this one, does it show that? No. No, I got ahead of myself here. But this is called the Pillar of Absalom. It is not related actually to Absalom. It's only about 2,000 years old, not 3,000 years old. But still, the story of Absalom is so prominent, and what David did and what happened in that whole scenario is so important that that's what this is called. And over time, this picture shows it pretty clearly. When I first started going in the mid-'80s, you could only see the top part. I mean, it was like here. Because whenever people would go by, they would pick up a rock and throw it at it. And so literally tons of rock over the decades had accumulated around that because, Absalom was a bad guy. When you treat your dad bad, you're not a good guy. And so they showed their disdain for Absalom by throwing stones at his at his monument, supposed monument. The people that are throwing stones at things are generally not the good guys, but in this case, I guess you would say they are the good guys because they were disrespecting Absalom because he disrespected his father. So it's an interesting story, but it's an interesting story when you connect it to the place where it happened. There's a paragraph here that I think I'll just read it, where I make the comparison between Jesus weeping over the city and David weeping over the city for different reasons in a way, but David because he was concerned about what's going to happen to the city, Jesus because he knew what was going to happen to the city. King David fled over the Mount of Olives, weeping because of what he thought the rebellious son of David would do to the people of the city. In leaving, he passed by the same spot where Jesus, that other son of David, would later cry over the disaster coming upon the rebellious people of the city who would reject him as king. David was being rejected by his own son and those rebels who joined him. Jesus, the obedient son, was rejected by many rebels during the week of the triumphal entry. Absalom would die hanging from a tree by his hair as he was pierced by 3 spears to the heart. Jesus would die nailed to a tree with blood and water running down as his heart was pierced by a spear. Absalom was buried in a pit with stones piled upon his body. The city of Jerusalem would fall to the Romans, and not one stone would be left upon another. They were two very different sons of David. And I say I don't think this comparison is significant, but I thought it was interesting that to compare them in that way. So the second piece that we'll come to here is the Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, or the Palm Sunday walk. And in these pictures, I'm showing you the pathway. This is toward the top, obviously. Today, it's paved. When I started, it was not nicely paved as it is today. This shows you how old I am. But here is another person. Here is, by the way, this is Linda's father over here when we were walking down that pathway. And there's Linda herself about halfway down.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So the bus takes you up to the top.
Right.
Drops you off and you walk down.
Exactly.
You're not walking up.
That's exactly right. A bus driver would think about those things, right? Yeah, they drop you off at the top and you walk down, which it would be a whole lot, because it's a steep walk. And it used to be kind of dangerous, actually, when it had gravel on it, because gravel is slippery. But now that it's paved, it's much more solid. But you can see, it's walled up on both sides. That's Dr. Dwayne Brady over there on the left. And you can see some of the stones that they've left along the way here. By the way, this guy here, many of these people, these particular pictures aren't with us anymore. They're in heaven. But he was a mob enforcer. And he killed a few people in his day. And he got saved, obviously, afterwards. But he told me, he said, I've written a letter to the FBI, and I've instructed my wife to give it to them after I die, because it will clear up a number of things for them. And so he died, and I presume that his wife mailed the letter, but it's just, you never know when you travel to Israel who you have traveling with you on the bus, right? The mob enforcer, but that's, fortunately we don't show his face, but he was getting up there even then. But anyway, the Palm Sunday walk this is what it is today. As you come along, you have the cemeteries all around you. They're mostly on the left-hand side and straight ahead. But you come to a place that's called Dominus Flevit. Now, I'll just show you in this picture here. This is Dominus Flevit. And I'll show you some more pictures. So we've come down this walk. You go through these gates into this place where Jesus looked over the city. But I go in there, but I also take people through this gate into this area here. And this is presumably one of our groups that's in there. And but what you can do from that spot, because you're basically eye level with the city of Jerusalem, with the Temple Mount. And so who asked me last week how far it is from the Mount of Olives to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? Oh, not here. Well, see, there you go. Because I looked it up, and then I forgot. But anyway, it is about 3/4 of a mile, if I remember correctly, when I looked it up after I got home. But those two gray domes, that's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And obviously you recognize the Dome of the Rock. In the story of Abraham, where does Abraham offer Isaac? Does anybody, without a prize, does anybody know the place? The threshing floor of Arana the Jebusite? Is that what you were saying? Is that where they offered Isaac?
No, I think it was, didn't you say the Tower of the Spirit?
Yeah, the Dome of the Spirit and the tablets. That's where the Ark of the Covenant rested, and where David had the Ark of the...
So it wasn't where Isaac was?
No, a different spot, yes. Was that Moriah? Was that a lady, or is that... yeah, well, you are half right. It was Moriah, but it was the land of Moriah, not Mount Moriah. It doesn't say, but the land of Moriah. And so Mount Moriah, this is Mount Moriah here. The Dome of the Rock is on Mount Moriah. It's all we call it Temple Mount today. So but I am of the opinion, and this is what I point out when I go to the cemetery, because you're looking straight across. You can see right here, and you can see the relationship between Calvary and where Isaac was supposedly offered. And when God said, go to the land of the Moriah, to the place that I will show you, God is going to show him the place once Abraham gets here. And the question is, what place did God show to Abraham once he arrived here? I'm of the opinion that, the Jews all believe it was here. I'm of the opinion it was there. That isn't far. This is a telephoto lens also, but still, it's not more than a couple hundred yards. So why would God tell Abraham to offer Isaac here when he could go to the same place where Christ was going to be offered? The two sons, the two willing sons. When Isaac was offered, he was 18 years old. His father would have been 118. So let me ask you this question. If there's going to be a fight between an 18-year-old and a 118-year-old guy, who's going to win that fight? Yeah, well, no. He is not going to win that fight. And so you're going to say to this son, I'm going to kill you on this mountain? And, what son is going to say, oh, fine, whatever. But it tells you something about Isaac, that he was willing to do his father's will and essentially offer his own life. And that's exactly what Jesus did right here. And so for the parallel, and you can go other parallels. Who carried, in the case of Isaac and Abraham, who carried the wood up the hill? Isaac did. Isaac carried the wood of his own sacrifice up the hill. Jesus also carried the wood of his own sacrifice up the hill. So a willing son offering himself. And when you stand in this spot here and you look across the way, you're basically at eye level with this, and it is very evident what happened in the case of Abraham and Isaac just by looking at what's there and putting the two and two together. At least it makes sense to me. Yes, sir.
Jesus kind of confirmed that when he said in John, it's quoted in John, where he told the people in the temple that Abraham saw my day and he was glad. And I think that would be kind of reinforcement of your idea that it was at the same spot. The ram being obviously Jesus.
Right.
In just a symbolic way.
You'd make a pretty good Bible teacher. Yeah, exactly. And by another parallel, by the way, when Isaac says to his dad, we have the wood, we have the fire, but where is the sacrifice? And not just God will provide, but God will provide himself the sacrifice. In the language, it's he himself. But in the King James, it actually says it correctly, in my opinion. God will provide himself the sacrifice. He himself will be the sacrifice. And that's what happened on Calvary. But anyway, it is something to stand there in that cemetery and be eye level and see what happened there. So, the land of Moriah is this general area here, and this would have been Mount Moriah. So Mount Moriah, and because when you're talking mounts, You know, there's 7 hills, 7 mountains in Jerusalem. I mean, they're not mountains, they're barely hills, right? I mean, they're not like Lord's Hill or whatever, but these are low, they're not high elevation kind of places. So, and they call it Mount Calvary, and that's a rise. There's definitely a rise, and there's another rise back over here, and a rise here with, you know, lower spots in between. There's a low spot over there between Mount Zion, but they're, you know, they're like little gullies between. Well, they're definitely high compared to that. They're 3,500 feet higher, 3,800 feet higher. So anyway, instead of turning into the cemetery, you turn to the right and you come to this church building. This is the modern iteration of it. It has these little teardrop collecting artistic emblems to represent the fact that Christ wept over the city in this location. And from inside the church, this is an unusual church in the sense that the altar faces to the west. Typically, churches have the altar facing to the east, toward Jerusalem. And this one is that way. But anyway, it's toward the way. It's unusual, but because of where it is. And, you know, this is the communion altar here, right here. And this window is the spectacular. I mean, the artist who created that window, look at the crown of thorns, you know, the cup. But there's the city, and right there's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's all laid out right there in front of you from inside the church. From outside, there's this nice platform, which you're eye level looking at the city. That altar that I just showed you inside has this image of a chicken, a hen, gathering her chicks. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That is the image that's represented on the front of that altar where Jesus is weeping over the city. I'm impressed by the fact that outside the wall, just to the left of the entry to this church, there's this floor of an earlier church. It's a 4th century church. And but it has this beautiful mosaic floor, and I've told you this story 2 or 3 times already, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, I had that floor copied by an artist, and I was going to put it on the floor of the Chapel of the Resurrection, but I ended up putting it on the front of it. But it has the characteristic, when you see this pattern of mosaic, that's a Byzantine pattern. I just snagged from the church, they had some leftover tiles, and so in the little chapel that I'm building on my property, I'm going to put some tiles down that have mosaic painted on them. So it's almost as good as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but this is that original one. And Jesus looks at the city, you know, and bear in mind, they're cheering him. It's the triumphal entry. And they're, you know, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. They are, this is a happy crowd because they know that Jesus is the King who's coming into his city. Jesus is able to look beyond the politics of the moment and see the plan of God that was working out, but also see the choices that these people are going to be making very shortly, because some of the people who are cheering him at this moment are going to be yelling for his crucifixion just in less than a week. I mean, politics is fickle. They can turn on a dime, and one day you're the hero, and the next day they want to kill you. And it's not always a happy circumstance. So, this is the Church of Mary Magdalene, a Russian church. Beautiful gold domes, maybe the prettiest domes that are there. I think it is, yeah. The Dome of the Rock used to be kind of an aluminum kind of material that was on it, but the King of Jordan actually paid to have it upgraded, probably 25 years ago. So it actually has also gold on it, but it's you can make gold pretty thin and cover that big of an area. But yeah, it's very shiny and reflective. I wanted to get my little cross looking like that, but spray paint just ain't the same. But it is cheaper. That's the good thing. So when you come down the Mount of Olives, you come to the cemetery on the left, the Church of Dominus Flevit, where the Lord wept. That's on the right. That's about halfway down, eye level with the city. Then you go on further down, you come to this church, which is, 100 feet below the Church of Dominus Flevit. And then you go a little further and you come to this church. This is from the front. You approach it from the back. This is the Church of All Nations, built in the 1920s, I believe. And it's called the Church of All Nations because many nations contributed money for the building of it. And it's a beautiful church without a doubt. Inside the church, I should have had a picture of it, but there's some stones that were natural stones that are left to show, and with mosaics to show Jesus praying on that. I'll show you a picture of that a little bit later on. Let me see here. No, none of those have the Jesus praying. But anyway, this is the place of the Garden of Gethsemane, and they have a very nice garden there, and this is the garden you can walk through. Then they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, stay here while I pray. He took Peter and James and John along with him, and he began to be distressed and troubled. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Then he said, stay here and keep watch. I'm sorry that I didn't expand the letters on that correctly. But anyway, this is the area. And what you have in this area are olive trees that are extremely old. I mean, that's an old and gnarly olive tree. They also have some that they more recently planted, but they say they could theoretically go back 2,000 years. I doubt that, but but they're definitely old. There are trees. I have a tree in my yard that can grow to be 5,000 years old. It's the oldest living type of thing, and I have one, and it's about this tall. I want to wait around and see how it does, but anyway, it's actually in a pot right now. But anyway, these are definitely old trees in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus goes there to pray, and his disciples were a little bit on the sleepy side. Could you not watch with me 1 hour? They said. Jesus said to them, watch and pray lest you fall into temptation. Stay awake and pray, because if you will do that, you will do better than if you fall asleep. And at certain stages of life, that gets easier than other times. But anyway, this is the Garden of Gethsemane. I like to go across the street from the Garden of Gethsemane to this place. It's an enclosed area. This guy here, I used to pay him to get in there, and I read, and for several trips, I figured out what the system was, and so I'd bring some money, and I'd go up to the guy and says, hey, I got a group here. I'm wondering if you could let us into this area, this garden, because there'd be nobody in there. And I'd slip him the money, and sure enough, he'd produce the key. And then I read in the news a few years ago that he wasn't actually supposed to be doing that. He did it for years. And they finally, somebody finally did him in, but he definitely got some of my money, and obviously a lot of other people, because I think if you knew the drill, you knew how to get in there. You know, a lot of these places, you know, they're holy places, and you want to see them. Well, you and millions of other people, you know, and so you want to enjoy this moment in the Garden of Gethsemane all by yourself, along with millions of other people. And so you're very happy to slide somebody a few bucks if they can get you into a place that feels a little more like it. And this is what it looks like from the inside of that garden area that I told you about. And I like to get in there because you can I tell the people after I talk to them a little bit, I said, now find yourself a quiet place somewhere in the garden here and spend a few minutes in prayer, and then I'll come get you. That's the wrong picture there. This is that place. And so you can see, you know, people everywhere. And from my groups, these are all, you know, they're sitting here and there, over there. You spread out and you spend a little bit of time in prayer. Even gives me a chance to do that. And that must have been a springtime, because you see those little red anemones there and the little flowers here. Pretty little spot that way. It is a quiet spot for sure, and you can pray, but it is right next to the city, and so you can hear the sounds of the buses outside and all of that. But it is the place where Jesus prayed, and there's a stone. This is that particular spot. I like that picture. And I like this picture too. It's you notice that there's crosses on these tombstones. There's obviously the city of Jerusalem there. Right there's Absalom's pillar, so that gives you an idea. The Mount of Olives is up here. But this is another angle that it's a unique angle that you probably aren't going to see everywhere, but it's a cool picture, and I like it. So let me see where my notes are. Well, let's go to, here's one. Let's go to Ezekiel 37, Jerusalem as the seat of the king's power. This is what the sovereign Lord says: I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back to their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms. So I did a couple of weeks ago, I did a podcast with a pastor from Sunrise Chapel, and we were talking about anti-Semitism in the church, and why is it that many in the conservative side of things are kind of turning against Israel. Well, it's a misguided America First idea, because the fact is that Israel is fighting the same enemies that we are fighting, and the ones that want to do them in are the same ones that want to do us in. And so letting the Israelis fight for us seems like a smart thing to do. I mean, and you know what money it costs us, it's a lot better than sending troops over there to do it ourselves. Or they'll come here, and we'll be fighting them here. But anyway, where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So the fact is that what Ezekiel says, that God is going to be king over Israel one of these days, and he's going to bring them back from the places where they had gone. So you can say that Israel is no longer what they once were, but what's clear is that God isn't finished with them yet. If he's going to gather them back together, and he is going to be king over them in Israel, then it's very clear that even though they're largely unbelieving today, and I would say rebellious against God today, they're not a particularly religious group over there right now, that still God is going to do something with them. Why? Because he made promises to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, but not Ishmael, Jacob, but not Esau. There were promises to them, and those are the descendants that are in the land today. And they are the ones to whom God made the promises, that I'm going to give this land to you forever. And he made promises to David about a son of his that is going to sit on the throne. And that's who Jesus is, the son of Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on us, the beggar cried. And so when you read those things, and then what Ezekiel says here, it's very clear that Israel still has a place in the plan of God. He has not left his promises. That's important because God is a promise-keeping God. When he makes a promise to Israel, he keeps it. When he makes a promise to us, he keeps it. And so we're trusting him. We're all trusting that that'll be so. But this is the city of the great king, as it is called, the seat of his power. And then maybe I'll just end with this. In Matthew 24, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, tell us, when will all this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and all these are the beginning of birth pains. But where was he when all that teaching took place? He was on the Mount of Olives. They were sitting up there under the shade of a tree maybe and looking out toward Jerusalem. And the disciples had heard a lot of things about what was going to happen in the future. And they said, when's this going to happen? How will we know when you're coming? And Jesus answered those questions from the Mount of Olives. He spoke about it there, and that's exactly the same place to which he's returning one of these days soon. Jesus will land feet first on the Mount of Olives. The Tower of the Ascension that you have there is the top of the Mount of Olives. It is the place from which Jesus ascended, and it's generally the place to which he's going to return. Somewhere, we don't know exactly where, but it's not that big of a mountain. You're pretty much looking at the whole top there of the Mount of Olives, so you can see that it's not such a big area. But he's going to return there. He ascended from there, and he's going to return in the same place. Just the way you've seen him go, you're going to see him come again. By the way, this village here is called Silwan. In the year 1900, there were 50 people living there. Now there's several thousand. But it's an Arab village primarily, with a few Jewish homes that have been purchased, and they've moved in there just to kind of reestablish the claim, if you will. But you can see why people want to be buried there. Why wouldn't you be buried in the exact spot where Christ is going to return? It's a good idea. We're looking forward to that. Okay, anybody with a comment or question? Yes, sir. Yeah, it does say that. I saw a friend of mine he posted a picture last week. His name is Jeff Cromer, and it showed the fault line that runs kind of over in this area over here, And so what it says is that this part of the hill is going to move this way, this part of the hill is going to be this way, and there's going to be an opening through that for easy access, I guess. But yes, it's going to split in two. It's going to literally be a movement there, and there apparently is a fault line. I asked him where he got that information. I wanted to, look up to see if it was, because you hear a lot of things said that, but whether they know that there's a fault line there or not, I don't know. But I know there's going to be an earthquake there, and what's going to happen? There's going to be a literal movement of between that'll open this up. Why would that be of interest to anybody? Up here, it's all Arabs. And so if the Jews are going to go out this way, basically, you open up a road right through the Arab section without having to go through the Arab section. I don't know if that's the way it is. You see a lot of the roads that Israel has made currently, they will basically create not tunnels open to the top, but well protected against snipers and that sort of thing from either side. In case of in the time of war, they can move their vehicles easily through, and that is what is going to happen. Not for this maybe the same reason, because the Lord's clearly going to be in charge, and so he will be addressing things. But when he comes, is that part of the Battle of Armageddon? And is the opening of that earthquake, is that part of how the Battle of Armageddon gets fought? I don't know. It does describe it in the Bible, so I just accept that that's going to be.
We'll have a heavenly view of the whole thing.
I don't think you will, Bob, because when Christ returns, you're coming with him. So, presuming you've already gone up, right? But you're coming back. So you won't have a heavenly view, you'll have an earthly view. It'll be eye level. So you were wrong. You get a zucchini for that, my friend, next year. Yes, sir.
Absalom's rebellion, does that indicate maybe a lot of Jerusalem was really upset with David at the time?
Well, Absalom was a pretty slick fellow, and he learned what politicians learn is promise them anything and they'll follow you. And so, but I wouldn't say, because it does mention large groups of people that were in Jerusalem who were loyal to David. So I would guess it sounds more like Absalom did his work in the larger environment, not in Jerusalem itself where the king was, but that he was going to come to Jerusalem and kill everybody that was there. So maybe there were people in Jerusalem who were, unhappy with David. I mean, there's always going to be people complaining, but I would think that the people were more in the outside that Absalom was able to go to and say, if I was king, it wouldn't be like this. I would have solved that problem and this problem. And so I think he was operating more in the perimeter rather than in the center. Anybody else?
On one of our trips to Israel, we had a lady on board, older lady, and she was the grandmother of the King Hussein's wife, Jordan. And when we landed in Tel Aviv, they had a limousine there and offered her a driver and a limousine instead of staying on the bus with the rest of us.
So you traveled, that was the previous queen. She was an American. Yeah. So her grandmother, and was her grandmother a Christian?
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
She probably, was a convert later on. But actually, she was the grandmother by marriage. Her husband was the Jordanian.
Yes. I mean, so the queen was an American. She married, was it King Hussein? What was his name? Of Jordan. So you had the grandfather who was killed in 1952, shot at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on Temple Mount. Then his son, who has recently died a while back. Now the third generation, the grandson of that king, is the current monarch in Jordan. But the middle son is the one who is married to an American. Yeah, but you know it's. I mean they're Muslim, but there is a group called Christian Friends of Jordan that has met in Washington D.C. and has met with various officials in Jordan, and the amount of Christian influence in the government of Jordan is surprisingly high. And so it's not something that I think even if he became a Christian, it's unlikely that he would talk about it. But it is definitely true that there are Christians that are associated with Jordan. You hear a lot about Christian Friends of Israel. You hear nothing about Christian Friends of Jordan. But the group does exist. I've never attended a meeting, but I'm aware of meetings that have taken place in Washington, D.C. And I don't know whether it was that the Queen's mother who may have had some influence there, but there's definitely some sympathy in Jordan for Christianity, far more so than most other places. So, yeah. Anybody else? Okay, let's pray together. Father God, may your blessing be upon your people today. Strengthen us. Help us to serve you with all of our heart and with great joy. We're looking forward to the coming of the Lord. We know it's soon, and we want to be ready for that. We want to do everything we can to strengthen your church in the interim. Now, Lord, as we go our separate ways, I pray that the peace of God that passes all understanding will rest and abide with us all, both now and forevermore. Amen.